aboard!
Outdoor service owners, rise and shine. It's time to start fueling your success, one adventure at a time. Welcome to Outdoorsy Entrepreneur, brought to you by Zevbit, where business owners explore ways and take charge and level up. Today we're talking to Zevbit software about knowing your numbers and creating your budget when you get started with their software. We are your hosts. I'm Kevin, and this is Alex and Shiloh. Join us on this journey every Wednesday. Like, comment, subscribe on our YouTube channel, and listen to wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on our social media platforms at Outdoorsy Boss. Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on. We're excited to go through and talk about everything budget-wise, knowing your numbers, and everything good that comes out of that.
Exciting stuff. This is probably one of the most eye-opening things for people and a great feature that we have.
Yeah, knowing your numbers is crucial. I know back in the day cafe, when I was young and getting started, we did the old test the win day on what we should be charging, asking people on Facebook, hey, what do you think about this yard? What should I charge? I may be running my business out of a 6,000 square foot warehouse, but the guy scratching his head may be running out of a garage. So our budgets, our numbers are going to be totally different as far as having the ability to recoup all your overhead as well as your profit line item. So this is really crucial for all business owners out there, no matter the industry, to easily use Zevbit and know your numbers with developing this budget that we're going to talk through today, of like going from scratch, creating a budget from just a sample to show everybody how simple and easy it can be.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time with as far as like a budget goes, some guys might know how much they're paying for their insurance and marketing and trucks and these certain things, and kind of have a rough idea of their overhead, but they're not exactly sure on how to actually implement that into the way they estimate, of like being able to recover that overhead on their estimates and make sure they're actually be profitable, know what net profit they're going to make on the job. So that's kind of what our tool helps does, is puts in your employee information, puts in all your overhead. That way we can break it down into an hourly overhead rate. That way you can actually use that on the estimate. So we're kind of going to go through that start to finish.
Nice.
And answer any questions you guys have. Sweet.
Cool.
All right, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here and we can go through it. So this is the test budget here. Basically, the initial start is just to put in your budget name and your company name here. So you'll just put the year in your name, and then you can put your revenue last year, projected revenue for the next 12 months, as well as how many weeks per year you're working and how many hours per day you're working. So there's a couple of initial adjustments up there for the budget. I'll just leave this at a $500,000 revenue for now. From there, we can go through and plug in all of our employee information. So you can put your employees' names here, however many employees you have, and how much you're paying them per hour. So let's say we have like 25 an hour, 23, and a couple guys at 20 or 21. And then here you'll just put in how many months per year they're working. So if you're in like a seasonal place and you're not working 12 months, there is a way to adjust that here, as well as how many hours per week on average. And essentially how this works is any hours that are over 40, you can add an overtime multiplier here to calculate the cost, including overtime.
Oh, cool.
So let's say,
and can you change the names as well? The employee names?
You can put whatever. You can actually put their names here just so you can have that organized. Yep.
Yeah.
And then it'll show you how many overtime hours per year, the total budgeted hours for that employee. Here you can add any bonuses that you want to account for, or extra holiday/vacation days that you want to put in here. So I could put like 2 days here, and it'll calculate the extra cost for that.
We don't need no vacation for our guys. They need to work, damn it.
And then if you have more than 8 employees, there's an option here where you can expand this so you can put in however many you have. And then the next section here gets down to like future field employees. So basically when we're building this budget, we're thinking about the next 12 months. So usually any employees that you're going to hire in the next 3 to 4 months, we recommend including them in the budget. And you can put in how many months from now you plan on hiring them. That way it'll just include them for like the later part of your budget to make sure you're still including that in the cost and in all of your expected revenue and whatnot.
That's excellent tool there too, because say you're planning next year or next quarter and you need to add a spray tech or someone new, you can then pop them in quickly to see that number change And then say you're bidding a job that requires that extra person. And if you get that job, a contract, say, then you can know that your numbers to charge for is going to be more, and then plug that in as a sample, what do they call that, scenario, yep. And then bid it accordingly to having that extra person.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that's kind of in the field labor section with employees you have and any future employees. Here it's going to show you like your average cost per hour based on the numbers you put in and the total field labor cost. So in this example, it's 200,000 going to field labor. And then the budgeted man hours. So this is going to show the total budgeted man hours for the entire year based off of the months per year and the hours per week and how many guys you have. It's going to calculate the total budgeted man hours for the year for your company. And that way you can calculate, like, that's the total amount of man hours you need to sell on your estimates. And that's actually how we're going to calculate the overhead rate per hour down below. So I'm actually, since this is 200,000 in labor, I'm just going to put in the example revenue here as $1 million, just as an example, because we have there's 4 guys here. So maybe I'm planning to hire one more in 3 months from now. I could plug that in and it's going to add that cost on there. So let's say I have 5 guys, maybe I'm doing $1 million a year, whatever it comes out to. And this will show you a breakdown on the labor here.
Yeah, because that's really important note to self here is that just because you are job to job or you may have reoccurring services as your service platform, you're not always able to recoup all those full man hours that you're in turn paying
Yep.
your employees. So that's why the budget's crucial, because you need to go ahead and put in there that you are paying them year round or every
Yep.
season, because your pricing has to recoup that fact of life that you are going to have to pay people full time when they are full time, etc. So it's not like you come to the end of a week, oh, we only worked 30 hours this week, guys. Here's 30 hours paycheck. Sorry, because you'll lose employees that way. So you have to pay them full time, 40 hours minimum, right? And this is a great way to make sure you capture that return on your job.
Yeah,
quota.
And we actually have something built in here for unbillable time. So this is going to be your total field labor costs. But then once we get in the overhead section down here, it's actually talking about unbillable time. So it's set at 30 minutes per day per employee, and you can adjust it however you want. But this is for shop tasks, unloading and loading trucks, training and meetings, callbacks on projects is a big one. If you ever have to go back and fix something, you're not getting paid for that time. So including and allocating for that is important. So then you can see okay, out of my total hours, how many am I allocating as unbillable for the year and what percent?
Yep.
And that way you can make sure you're allocating for that cost.
Yeah, that lost time, the downtime, and also, guys, when you're bidding jobs, always price in all the travel associated to that specific job. So that's no matter if it's one-off job or every week, you always want to have calculated, if I'm going from property A to property B and then from B to C, you're going to allocate that much travel time. So that customer is responsible for the windshield time.
Definitely.
A lot of times we see people have their employees start at 7, but they don't get to the job till 8, right? And so that 1 hour they're just paying, and it's not on a job, so they're just coming out of the net profit.
Yeah, in a lot of cases when guys are remote locating, or it does take, you're in a different township and all your work's an hour away, what we would do is take that hour and divide it by all the customers that day. So the first customer doesn't eat every time that full hour. We divide it with, we had 6 or 7 stops.
Yeah, definitely. All right, awesome. So the next section here is getting now into the admin office employees. So we first covered field employees. Now it's into this section, which for some people might just be your owner's salary. Other people, if you have an office manager, project manager, salespeople, designers, anything like that, you're able to include their annual salaries here, as well as if they have a commission percentage, you could put that in, and how much you estimate them to sell or manage on commission. That way you can calculate an expected commission amount, as well as we also have a way, let's say I put in, I'm going to plan to pay myself $60,000 this year. we have a way where here you can actually break down your percent of time on site with the crew. So for some owner operator guys, maybe you're going to put 50% of my time is on site with the crew and 50% of my time is admin and estimate stuff. So here, if you do
Okay.
that, then it's actually going to take that. If I plug in my hours, like I'm working 20 hours a week on site, then it's going to take that 60 grand and it's going to split it half and half between field cost and admin overhead cost. So that's one thing we
Cool.
built in here, whether it's for yourself or if you have a guy who's like part admin, part field, something like that.
Yeah, that's important because so many of us getting started that first 5 years or so, we do work
Yep,
out in the field. So
definitely.
that's good.
Definitely. And then same thing here, any future admin office employees you plan to hire. Down here, we talked about the unbillable time. We also have calculations for workers' comp and employer taxes. So you can either plug in your percent of payroll for each one of those, or you could look at like how much you paid in workers' comp last year and kind of project how much you're going to grow or whatever, and then plug in the number based off of that.
Yeah, I think it's important at this step to, talk to your CPA or reach out to a CPA. And there's information online of, depending on where you live and depending on the service that you're providing, what the level of workman's comp
Yep.
percentage is for your
Yep.
industry. So
And you could probably also reach out to whoever's providing you with the workers' comp policy. They'll be able to tell you what percent it is as well. So, um,
sure. Yeah, your
and then
insurance
even
agent.
for
Yeah.
employer taxes, if you're not sure what percent of payroll your employer taxes are, when you run payroll, you can look at how much is the amount that's you're having to pay in the employer tax amount, and then you can divide that based off of the total amount of the payroll, and you can figure out like what percent roughly is going towards the employer taxes. But you can definitely
Yeah.
consult with a CPA or bookkeeper, and they can help you with that as well. But yeah, down here it'll show the labor burden costs. Essentially, these three costs we want to figure out what is that costing per hour here, based off of the total projected van hours up there. We're gonna say, okay, we're paying the guys up here 23.66 per hour average, but then we have these unbillable time, workers' comp, employer taxes, these different expenses, which when we add that all up, it comes out to another $4 an hour. So now it's costing me like 28 an hour with my labor burden. So that's kind of how we broke that down
Mhm.
here. The next step is the equipment. So that's where you're going to go and you can plug in the names of the equipment. Let's say I have a skid steer, mini skid steer, whatever equipment that you have financed or leased would go in this section. So, and you could just put in the monthly cost. So you could put in, I'm paying $1,000 for this and 800 a month for this and whatever other equipment you have. And then for equipment that
Mhm.
you have purchased outright or paid off, then you can plug in. Let's say I have a truck that I paid off already or I bought. Then I can just put in the replacement value. Say it's 50,000. How many years I plan to use / own it? Let's say 5 years, and how much I can sell it for after that. Let's say 20,000. And based off of that, and how many months per year and hours per week, it'll calculate an hourly cost for me. So I know, okay, this machine to own with the depreciation is just going to cost this much per hour, and that way you can include that in your budget.
Yeah, that's important because our equipment, our trucks, they give out, and it's better to go ahead and account for that cost before they die, because then you can sell it while it still has some value, and then you've got a newer machine more often that's going to be very optimum in its performance. So very good that you can plug this into your
Yeah,
budget.
exactly. So that's kind of the equipment section. We have a few other things down here for equipment, which is like fuel, which basically you'll just plug in how much. Let's say I'm spending 1,500 a month on fuel on average. I'll just plug that in here. It'll calculate what the annual cost is, and then truck maintenance, machine maintenance. Maybe for those, I just want to put like I don't know, 5,000 for the year for both of them. You can kind of do this however you want, but we have like a different options in here, however you want to break it down for repair. Tires is a big one. Maybe I need to plan another $1,000 a year at least for just the tires. Registration, like when I have to go renew my tags on my trucks and trailers, like all those costs. So this will basically give you the categories to be able to go and plug in how much you think you want to allocate as far as monthly costs and annual costs. And
Okay.
then we'll have another section here for purchasing small / miscellaneous equipment. So this is like tools for trailers, compactors, saws, that kind of stuff. You can just go and plug in how much you want to allocate for those things. and then it gets to all the other overhead. So we have these different categories. The first one is advertising and marketing. So you can, however you're doing your ads, whether it's on Facebook, Google, website, Yelp, however you're doing your ads, you'll just go and, let's say I'm spending $600 a month on Yelp and $500 on Facebook ads. You could go plug in those numbers, or you can also plug it into the annual cost if you want to.
Okay.
Insurances, we have general liability insurance down here, auto insurance here. I'll just plug in a couple example numbers here. And then if you have any like machine or equipment insurance or umbrellas, anything like that. We have a field overhead category, which is like uniforms, shirts for the employees. If you ever buy your employees lunches, if you have like work phones for any of your guys, porta potties, GPS trackers, that type of stuff, you'll put in here. Let's say,
Yeah, PPE is a big one.
The lunches are the crazy one. When you start asking people about that, and they say like it could be $1,000 a month, they're buying it every day, and then it turns out to be 12 grand. They kind of get silent after that.
Wow.
But yeah, PPE is definitely a big one. We can put that in here. That's definitely important to allocate for. Like it might be $100 a month or $200 a month or whatever, just in like replacement and classes and whatever. But yeah, from there we have subscription and software. So if you have Zevbit or QuickBooks or anything like that, you can put those in. Professional services. This is accountant, bookkeeper, that type of stuff. You can allocate your costs for those. Say I will have $2,000 for my accountant and $200 a month for my bookkeeper, whatever. If you have shop rent or utilities, you can plug that in. If you're having to rent a space, or your like internet and any of these bills that are for the business. Bank and financial charges. So you could put in credit card fees that you don't charge the homeowner for. Most of the time we recommend, but if in some places you're not allowed to. So there's that.
Okay.
Licenses, payroll processing fees, that kind of stuff. And then we also have a section for business loans and credit card debt, and then office supplies. So that would be like your computers and phones, ink and paper, all the other office supplies. It basically just lays everything out where they can go and plug in their numbers, and anything that we don't have in here, of course, they can just add in these blank spots here. So. The last couple categories here is personal development and travel. So if you're in any like mentorship groups or coaching, or if you go to any events, that's going to be also overhead. And then all the other overhead, if this is just a section where you can list anything else out that we didn't include. So essentially, once you do that, you can scroll down here and it's going to show you an overview. So these are going to be all the categories we just went through. It's going to show all the numbers you plugged in, and it's going to show you what your total overhead is for the year. For everything that you plugged in. So let's say I'm just going to go and add a little bit here just to make this budget accurate. Let's say I have a shop that I'm spending a little bit on, or whatever other details here. And then down here, it's going to show you your total overhead cost. So in this example, it's $140,000, which comes out to $11,000 a month. And once you get there, the next step is the materials subcontractors. So once we have like all your overhead figured out, and we've done the labor, we've done all the overhead, next is materials and subs. So this makes it pretty simple, where you're just going to plug in how much per month you're typically spending on materials and subs. And this can be difficult because some months can range a lot, and it can get crazy. One thing you could do is you could look at like the total amount you spent on materials last year and divide by 12 to get a rough idea, or just kind of judge it based on roughly how much, take like an average of how much you're spending. Let's say I'm spending $20,000 a month on the materials, and maybe just sub out a few things like $3,000 a month or something. You'll plug in those numbers for your company, and down here in the budget overview, you'll be able to see a breakdown of where everything's coming in. And based off of that, you can see like where all the numbers are.
The materials. Now, I was under the impression that when I'm creating a budget, it's stuff that is indirect and direct.
Correct.
But as far as materials came, that was very job specific. So that would be quoted in a job, and then the customer would pay me for those materials.
So the budget, these numbers here don't affect the overhead recovery or the actual numbers for the budget itself. The only reason we put this in here is so that they can see how much net profit they would have left over in that scenario. So like we calculate the main numbers that we need is the labor cost and the overhead costs. Like those are the two important things. But then from here, if we give them the option where they can if they plug in their materials and subs, then they can see, okay, I would have this much net profit left over based off of if I spend this much on materials this year. And that way it can kind of just they can plug in numbers and make sure it's not going to be like negative or something. We've done some budgets where they make in 1% or something, and they're like, okay, I either need to be more efficient, or I need to be able to make a little bit more revenue than I was predicting, or I need to reduce some of my costs. They got to kind of look at it and figure out what they can do to improve their profit margin. So. Sure. That's kind of the materials it's not super important for the budget itself. It's just kind of to give the contractors a guide of where the profit's coming in at. But the next part down here is what really matters with the overhead. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to split the overhead to be recovered between labor and subcontractors. And we're going to break down this percentage based off of your overview up here on how much you're entering here. And it's just going to give just the point of that is to break it down, because let's say instead of this, I did like 50-50. Let's say I did 15,000 on materials, 15,000 on subs. Let's just like bringing up my sub number a little bit. So now my subs is 180,000 and my field labor is 260,000. Based off of those numbers, it's going to calculate how much overhead should be recovered from each. So we're always going to keep more overhead being recovered through labor. But if you're subbing out a decent amount, we're going to want to make sure that you're also recovering some overhead through the subcontracted amount. Because if you only did something with subcontractors and none of your employees, then you wouldn't be recovering any overhead on that if you just did it all off of the hours. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. That makes
sense.
So
yeah, it'll basically say out of the 140,000, it's going to split it between labor and subs. And then based off of those numbers, it's going to take that and divide it by the total budgeted hours to figure out, okay, every hour my overhead's costing me X amount per hour. So the overhead's a little bit low in this example for how many employees I have. We typically see that overhead rates are anywhere from like 15 an hour up until 30, sometimes 35 an hour. So it can kind of all depend on the business widely, and sometimes it's even less or over those numbers. That's just kind of what we see on average. So from there, once you know these two numbers, it's crucial, because then you can figure out, okay, what does it actually cost me? Here we look at, okay, it's cost me 28 an hour to pay the guys and my labor burden. And then with my overhead costs, it's costing me 38 an hour with my additional overhead, which for some businesses might be like 50 an hour or 60 an hour, just depending on what the numbers come in at. And then here you could come in and plug your percent of profit you want to make. And based off that, I could tell you your labor charge per hour. That's kind of how that'll work with the budget. It'll basically allow you to come up with where everything's costing you, and then based off the profit you want, how much you need to be charging.
Okay. And the profit, is that gross profit, or is that
so that's net profit just on labor only, though, because it's not on material. Like the amount of profit that you put here will depend on like, let's say you want an overall gross profit of 50%. That's going to be a combination of your markup on labor, like your profit on labor, and your profit on materials, because there's two different numbers there.
Okay.
So you can adjust that in our system based on how you want. You could put your markup on your materials as well as your markup on your labor to calculate how you want to be charging and what profit margins you want to be landing at.
Okay. So they need to be charging about $67.12 an hour.
In this scenario, yes, that I laid out. We typically see our labor charges are typically like $75 an hour or up is kind of what we're seeing. But there are some places that are still like in the 65 or maybe 70 an hour. But I'd say on average, like I'm typically seeing it's like 75 an hour. Some guys are 100 an hour, 110 an hour, 120 an hour. So it all just depends on your overhead and your company and how it's all broken down.
Sure. Yeah. If you're just an owner operator, you got yourself, maybe another person in a truck, you're operating out of your garage. I mean, that number would be pretty far down there. You'd be able to compete with kind of anybody, but as you grow, add employees, add an office, all that stuff. So that's where we're going to have to recoup everything. So this is really nice, because it really breaks down all the devils in the details and all those little things that we don't always think of. And it's important to recoup that, because like when we were in our office, we had a huge office. We would even have a coffee budget where we would give guys fresh coffee every morning, and we had to commercial coffee maker that was serviced, et cetera. And those costs can add up if you don't
Definitely.
account for them. So,
yeah.
And even using this as like a forecasting, right? So like you were talking about bringing on a new employee, maybe a new truck, and growing into a $1.5–2 million company. You can throw all those things in here and see if your budget or your hourly charge still leaves you profitable, or if you need to increase that or increase the man hours.
right.
Yeah, so one thing that's
Exactly.
really interesting to look at is like if you have one crew right now and you're maybe considering going up to 2 crews, you can come in here and make a copy of this and then plug in your extra guys for that other crew and then plug in how your overhead's going to change. So maybe with another crew, you need another piece of equipment or whatever, however the overhead numbers are going to be adjusted. And that way you can see, okay, is it better to stick with one crew or does it make sense to go to 2 crews, based off all the numbers?
I'm in landscape contracting. So when I'm quoting a big job, say an HOA community, and I need to then figure I'm going to have to add another truck, another bunch of equipment, and 2 or 3, 4 more employees, and the contract's going to start beginning of the year, so I got to quote it accurately. I can then just jump into Zevbit here, alter my budget based on a new scenario, and then have that really accurate rate that I'm now going to quote that HOA. And if we win, we get paid well. So that's crucial to do those scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. And then but basically how we've set it up is you can just take these numbers, plug them into Zevbit as far as what is your average cost per hour, what's your total budget hours, how many hours you work in a day, and what your overhead is costing you, what you want to be charging per hour, that type of stuff. And then it makes Zevbit extremely accurate off of all your numbers. That way it knows everything about your business, where everything's costing, and it can when it does the estimates, it can calculate it all based off of that. So
Cool. You got anything, Alex?
Yeah, no, if anyone out there kind of knows their overhead or doesn't have it to a concrete thing of like an overhead recovery to an hour, this is a great place to put everything that's been in your head, all the bills that you have to pay. Take a look at it and get a baseline of where you're at as a company and double check that you are profitable.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very important, as newbies in the business, you kind of hear that I should be charging 45 an hour or 55 an hour, but it's all relative to you, your cost. So Zevbit provides you a great platform so you know exactly what to charge and recoup that profit by the end of the month, end of the year, etc. So thanks, guys, for sharing this budgeting tool. And we got links down in the description below where you can sign up for Zevbit and get a special introductory rate. And this wraps up this episode. Let us know, guys, how you're pricing your work out there. And make sure you subscribe to our Outdoorsy Entrepreneur YouTube channel and hit those notifications and listen to wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on our social media platforms at Outdoorsy Boss. We're here every Wednesday. Check it out. Big thanks for everybody watching. Big thanks for Zevbit showing us this killer new software that's going to help us become more professional, more accurate, better quoting, and just making more money. We need more money, guys. So appreciate you guys.
thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All aboard!